Hello guys, and welcome to another video. And with the Ancestor League wrapping up and a lot of players checking out until next league, all the events coming up in November, I thought it would be a good time to do a bit of a small video here compiling the tattoo tech from this league, with a view to this being useful in the future when, hopefully, tattoos are added to the core game. And I do think that tattoos will end up in the core game. They're just too important of a mechanic not to go in at some point. So this is a bit of a roundup of different mechanics that you can utilise with tattoos to make them even stronger and even more useful. And if I've missed something out here, please do let me know in the comments and I'll make a pinned comment down below. So let's get started. And we're beginning with a jewel that was actually added in this league specifically for tattoos. That's the Warrior's Tail unique jewel. Now this jewel grants an effect around a medium radius, which makes all the tattoos in this radius have 100% increased effect. And that's really, really powerful for some specific tattoos that grant really strong bonuses. In this example here, we have the tattoo of the Namahu Makanga, which grants +1 to maximum fire resistance. And because this is in the radius of the Warrior's Tail jewel, this will be granting 2 to maximum fire resistance. And for example, these small life nodes here, the Honoured Tattoo of the Oak, these will now be granting 4% increased maximum life each. Important to note is that the Warrior's Tail jewel is limited to 1, so you can't make use of more than one of these in your build. Alright, so next up we've got the Might of the Meek. This is another unique jewel, and this one grants 50% increased effect of non-keystone passive skills in its radius, but it also means that notable passive skills grant nothing, so you don't want to be allocating any notables in this radius if you can help it. So for example, right here I've got some tattoos of the Hinakura Death Warden, which usually grant 6% reduced effect of curses on you, and because they're in the radius of this Might of the Meek, they'll be granting 9% reduced effect of curses on you. And we've also got some tattoos of the Namahu Warmonger, which grant you a chance to explode enemies. This is a 2% chance. So within the radius of the Might of the Meek, this is going to be a 3% chance. And right here, we're also allocating some normal passives on the tree. And because the Might of the Meek affects all passives, not just tattoos like the Warrior's Tail jewel, you're going to be able to also boost up the effect of other small passives that are allocated. So these two life nodes here, which grant 6% each, they'll actually be granting 9% each. This jewel does suffer from the fact that notables grant nothing, so you kind of need to do a bit of strange pathing to avoid wasting points, but it can be very powerful. For example, if you can allocate many tattoos and get 150% effect on each tattoo. And next up we've got Unnatural Instinct, which was a really popular jewel in this league. Unnatural Instinct is a small radius unique jewel. It's once again limited to 1. And what this jewel does is it grants you the bonuses of unallocated small passive skills in its radius, but any allocated small passive skills will grant nothing. So you want to kind of get into this jewel and allocate the bare minimum of nodes to actually reach it, and then have as many as you can within the radius that grant a bunch of benefits for your build. The really powerful thing about this jewel, however, is that the tattoos that are in its radius are technically not allocated. They're just having their bonuses granted, and that means that you can use these to gain tattoos that have specific restrictions. For example, the tattoo of the Arohongui Makanga, which grants +1 to maximum cold resistance. Well, these tattoos have a limit on them so that you're not allowed to allocate more than one adjacent passive skill. If you do, they don't grant their bonuses. But for example, this jewel is right here, and we have 4 of these sitting right next to each other. But because none of these are actually allocated, and there's no joining passives allocated either, these are all granting their full bonus of +1 to maximum cold resistance. So this setup here will provide +4 to maximum cold resistance, and you'll be gaining all of these other small passives that are not allocated as well. And next up, we've got the Impossible Escape jewel. That one's allocated over here. So this one grants the ability to allocate passives without having them being connected to your tree around a specific keystone. This one is for Supreme Ego in this example. So right here you've got a ring around Supreme Ego. Any of the passives that are in this ring can be allocated without being attached to your tree. And in this example we're taking Charisma, of course. That would be the main reason to even take the Supreme Ego version of this jewel. And we've also got 4 of these tattoos of the Arohongui Makanga. Now once again, these are limited to 1 connecting adjacent passive skill. So in this example, we've got them sitting right next to each other, so there is only 1 joined passive skill, and this means that we're going to be able to gain 4% to maximum cold resistance on potentially a part of the tree which is not even anywhere near the rest of our joined tree. So that's a very strong combination right there. And next up we have something similar to that, and that's the Thread of Hope jewel. And this one allows you to allocate passives that are not connected to your tree once again, but they must be within this ring. So in this example here, we're taking some passives that may be useful to our build, but we've got a few intelligence small nodes here, and we're making use of the tattoo of the Valako Makanga to gain +1 to maximum lightning resistance, and because there's no more than 1, there's not even any attached nodes here, these are going to be able to grant their full benefit. And next up we have the Breach unique jewels. These are the Blue Nightmare, Green Nightmare, and Red Nightmare. They each grant specific bonuses based on resistances that are within their radius and allocated. So the Blue Nightmare in this example, it grants additional spell block based on 50% of the value of allocated lightning resistance or all elemental resistances in its radius. So in this radius here, we've got a bunch of tattoos of the Valako Storm Rider, which grant 8% to lightning resistance on each one. So each of these is going to be granting 8% lightning resistance and 4% chance to block spell damage. We've also got a few nodes here, which are non-intelligence nodes, which I've changed to Honoured Tattoo of the Sky, and these grant 3% to all elemental resistances, which then grant an additional 1% for chance to block spell damage as well. There are 2 other versions of this. One, the Green Nightmare, which grants chance to suppress spell damage for cold resistance and all elemental resistance in its radius. And the Red Nightmare, which grants chance to block attack damage for fire resistance and all elemental resistance in its radius. And one of the last jewels we're going to be talking about here is a timeless jewel, that's Elegant Hubris in the name of Caspero, which grants the Keystone Supreme Ostentation. This was used a lot this league. Probably the most this keystone has ever been used since it was introduced into the game, and that's because this keystone allows you to ignore attribute requirements. That means that you can go completely crazy with tattoos and just tattoo your entire tree, and just ignore any kind of attribute requirements there. You can probably outgear this keystone on most builds in the very late game with ridiculous gear, but this is a really fun keystone to use. I used this in a build this league, and it was a lot of fun. Means that you can just completely forget about worrying about attribute requirements, tattoo your entire tree, just go to town with tattoos, and that's really fun. One important thing to note about timeless jewels, for example this one here, the way it works is it actually dominates the nodes in its radius, and it actually makes them into a node that grants nothing. These Price of Glory nodes here, these cannot be tattooed. This jewel overrides tattoos, it overrides nodes on the passive tree, so these can't be tattooed. However, if you're using one of the other timeless jewels that doesn't dominate nodes and instead adds to it, for example, a Lethal Pride or a Brutal Restraint, those can be tattooed and they still grant their added benefits as well. And one of the last things we're going to be talking about in this video is Anoints. So Anoints can be quite important if you want to tattoo a notable which is kind of out of range of your passive tree. Let's say, for example, you wanted to reach a strength notable to gain +1 to the level of all strength gems, but your tree kind of doesn't really allow it, or you have to spend too many points to get there. Well, you could instead anoint a node that grants the strength notable, and then you could then tattoo it. So for example, this amulet here allocates beef, and we could have beef here, and for example your tree could be somewhere across on the left side of the tree, maybe you can't reach a strength node, and you could anoint it instead, and then once it's anointed you can then tattoo it. Important to note here is that there are a few other items in the game aside from amulets that can be anointed. These are all Blight uniques. There's 3 different cowls, one for each resistance. There's the Breath Sealer unique gloves, the Spore Guard body armor, the Stampede and Replica Stampede boots. And of course, there's also the Strangle Gasp, which I should mention. That's an amulet that can be anointed 4 times. And one important tech that should be noted here is the use of the cowl helmets. Now, these helmets typically aren't used in many builds because they have really awkward stats on them. They make one resistance have 75 always, and then they have another modifier which reduces the resistance you gain for the other 2 types of elemental resistance. These are really awkward to gear around. A lot of builds want to take advantage of maximum resistance, for example. So they're quite awkward to gear around, and that basically means that barely any builds, if any, use these helmets. However, they do have a very powerful mechanic on these helmets because they have 2 important lines on them. One reads that they can be anointed, and the other reads that they can have a second enchantment modifier. Now, an enchantment modifier on a helmet could be an anoint in this example, or it could be a labyrinth enchantment. This means that the cows can be anointed twice. And why is this useful? Well, you can actually anoint these items and then you can corrupt them and hopefully they brick to rare. And that way, if they're rare, they don't have these annoying stats on them that you have to try and outgear. And you hopefully roll some useful stats on there. For example, some life or some resistances or some suppression or something useful that you can actually make use of. And in this example here, I actually allocated some nodes and then I bricked this helmet to rare. And you can see I gained here some intelligence, some suppression, some life. The important thing here is that you're now using a helmet which is anointing 2 attribute notables, and that means that along with your amulet you can anoint 3 attribute notables, and then perhaps your tree can reach the last one. This is really important for the journey tattoos. In this example, we're looking at the journey tattoo of the body, which grants 25 maximum life per allocated journey tattoo of the body. Now, if you have one of these, it grants 25 life. If you have 2 of these, each tattoo will grant 50 life. And then it scales up from there all the way up to having 4 tattoos where each tattoo will grant 100 life for a total of 400. So as soon as you start investing in these, you kind of know you want to reach the maximum of 4. And this is one of the really good ways to do this because a lot of the life stacking builds are going to be on the left side of the tree and they're not going to be in a very good position to be able to gain all of these strength notables which largely lie on the top and the right side of the tree. And that's going to be about it for this video. Have I missed out any special tattoo tech? Please do let me know in the comment section below and I'll add that to a pinned comment. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you for your support this league. This video is going to kind of wrap up my content for this league. Probably going to do a few more videos here and there, but not too much stuff until the beginning of the ramp into next league, which is probably quite soon, actually. I think we're going to have the events through November, and then I should think we'll be getting information on League 3.23 towards the end of November, as it should be starting with the first week of December. So I look forward to that. Thanks for watching. Thanks, as always, to my channel members for your support, and I'll see you guys in the next one.